In this problem, we're given 3 sets of data and we're asked to create scatter plots for each of them and then answer the following questions based on the results. The first thing you can do before getting a scatter plot is type the data in by pressing the stat key. I will first turn the calculator on, then press the stat key. Press enter to have option 1, edit a list. I've already typed the data in to show you that if you have data and it's not the data you want, you can simply just hit the delete key many times and delete the old data, or an easier way sometimes is just to type over the existing data. Either way works. What you're going to want to do is make L1 your input column and L2 your column for your outputs. If you do this, the calculator will just assume that that's the way you set things up. So I'm going to start typing in 410 as my first input. Either press the down arrow or press enter each time and just continue typing in all your inputs one by one down the list. So my favorite way is just to press enter since it's so close. And whenever typing in this much data, it's easy to make a mistake. So the first thing I'm going to do when I get to the bottom is go back and make sure I've typed it in correctly. If I'm going a little fast, just pause the video until you catch up. When you get down to the bottom here, you can press the right arrow key and it'll pop up to the top of your output column, and you just continue typing in the numbers. It actually takes me a little longer because I'm actually just clicking these one at a time using the mouse key, and I'm not used to doing it that way. So you might want to fast forward the video a little bit if this gets too boring. I'm just typing in lots of data and I've got 2 more problems to go. Let's see here, negative 773. Okay, so that was a bit boring, but you do want to make sure, even though it's cumbersome, make sure that you type all the numbers in correctly, otherwise you'll have to redo the problem over again anyway. Once you get the data in, you need to make sure your plots are on, turn it on. You can access your plots by pressing Y equals. My plot one is already on, so suffice it to say when we're done with this problem, you could turn it off the same way you turn it on. You just up arrow up there until a plot is blinking, and it's just a toggle switch. If I press enter, and let me go down so you can see that it's no longer highlighted, so now my plot is off, but I want it on for this problem, so I'm going to up arrow and press enter and turn it back on. So you can just keep turning it on and off whatever you want. Just remember at the end of the problem you're going to want to turn it off. It can create problems later on down the road if you have it on and you don't want it on. Once the plot is on, you need to tell the calculator a good window to graph this. Well, the calculator actually has a feature already to find a good window to plot the data. If you press the zoom key and then you select option 9 by simply pressing the number 9, you'll get the feature called zoom stat. It's a statistical feature for which if you've typed in data, it automatically plots in a good window. So it looks to me, if I had to match these, in fact that's what you have to do first, is to match this set of data with the graph either A, B, or C. And it looks to me like this is A. It looks like almost perfectly linear, except you have this one dot that's a little bit too far to the left. So not knowing for sure, but it looks good for now. I'm going to choose A there. And I also want to say whether it's mostly linear, least linear, or moderately linear. My opinion is that this is almost perfectly linear. If this dot was just a little higher, it would be the best fit. This one seems a little less linear to me, and then this is obviously the worst. But I'm going to do a more sophisticated analysis here, a numerical analysis, to get a better idea which one of these is the most linear versus moderately linear versus least linear. So this is going to take a bit of time. But I want to make sure that your calculator is set up the way mine is. So if you were to simply go to your home screen by hitting quit, that's second mode, and I want you to go to the catalog, which you access by hitting second 0. I want to go down to a command that starts with a D, so I'm going to hit this button here because it has the green letter D there. Go down about 10 times until you get to a command called Diagnostic on. When you buy the calculator, the default is to have it off, and I always like my students to have theirs on. So I pressed second 0, down arrow down far enough to get to diagnostic on, press enter twice, and then I'll turn it on. I'll tell you in a minute what that did for me. But what I want to do is I'm going to pretend that I want the actual equation that best fits this data. And you don't even have to know what that means. What I'm actually after is what's called the correlation coefficient. And basically you can just tell by the number the calculator is going to give me which one of these is definitely the most linear, even though I think I got it right just by looking. So at any rate, to do this, you go back to stat. Since I only have that one set of data in there, it knows if I just press the right arrow now over to calc, I want to do number 4. You can either down arrow to number 4 or just press the number 4 on the keypad to get this command. Now in some calculators it does not look like this. After you select linear regression by pressing 4, you can just press enter a couple times. On my calculator I had to press enter several times to get down to calculate it. This actually gives you the opportunity to tell it that you put your x's in L1 and your outputs y in L2, but the default is to do it exactly the way we did it. So you can, if you have this calculator, go down to calculate. If it looks different, just trust me, if you press enter a couple times, or maybe 3 times versus 2 or 4 times, you get the following equation. I don't actually need to know the equation. What I wanted was this correlational coefficient R. So I'm just going to keep that down somewhere in my memory bank. The R came out to be negative 0.9896. Turns out that the fact that it's negative just means as you go from left to right in the graph, the data goes down, which is obvious. There's a negative correlation. As one variable gets bigger, the other one gets smaller. What I'm really after isn't the sign on the R value, but the absolute value of that number. So 0.9896 is what I'm after. The closer this number is to the number 1, the better the fit. So I'm basically going to use that as my determination whether something is most linear, least linear, or moderately linear. I just, by eyeballing this, it seems to me this is the most linear. And I think this is moderately linear. But we're going to actually spend time to actually go through the rest. So if you think you got the gist of it, you can stop the video. But if you want, I'm going to start over, press stat, and then I'm going to press enter. Now notice the person who made this problem kept the x's the same, so I can just type over my new output. So this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I can simply just type in the negative 89, negative 185, and go down the list and type in my new outputs. So I'm sure the person who made this problem had that in mind when he did it, to keep the inputs the same to save a little bit of typing. Now you are going to want to graph it perhaps in a slightly different window since my numbers are different by doing what we did before by pressing zoom 9. And if you look at it, it looks like this has got a small amount of curvature to it. Now it is distorted based on the window that I have versus the window I have here, but this looks like it matches letter B to me. If you wanted to look at that R value that I talked about before, you could press second quit and basically do what we did before. One shortcut to what we did before is to just press second enter and it'll draw that command back up. But perhaps it's better not to do that just because you might be new to the calculator. So I'm going to clear that out and remind you how we did it. We got the R value by pressing stat, right arrow over to calc, and then hitting number 4 for linear regression. And on most calculators you either press enter twice or 3 times, or in this case maybe 4 or 5 times, but on this calculator I need to go down to calculate and press enter. This time I got an R value that's not as close to 1. It's 0.96. If you remember right, the R value we had before was about 0.99 if you rounded 2 decimal places. This is only 0.96, a little smaller, reinforcing the idea that I think this is just moderately linear. And just by looking at that, it just looks a little less like it would line up. Like if you were to put a ruler up to this, or the side of a piece of paper, if you have one handy up to the screen, it just wouldn't quite fit a straight line like this one does. So this last one is obviously C now, and it's most obviously the least linear. But if you have the patience, I'll actually take the time and I'll just go quickly. I pressed stat, I press enter. I'm going to go and I'm actually going to type in the new outputs just to show you how bad the R value comes out to be. It's probably not as bad as you might think it's going to be, but it's going to be much worse than the previous two. So negative 4252, this is the part of the video that you might want to fast forward because there's no way I can go around this. I even tried to open up a different emulator and do this ahead of time in the video, and I had no luck. So as far as I know, there's no way to bypass this part right here where you type the data in. Once you type the data in, we pressed zoom 9 to get the graph, and it looks a lot like this one, like a shotgun blast. This is almost no correlation whatsoever. And you can tell that by hitting second mode to quit back to the home screen, doing what's called regression by pressing stat, right arrow, number 4 for linear, because we're trying to see how well a line fits. Again, on most of your calculators, you probably just press enter twice. If you have a T83, that's certainly so. I'm getting an R value of a mere 0.45 if you round to 2 decimal places. So this is a 45% linear correlation, whereas the first one was almost a 99% linear correlation. So I hope you enjoyed that video and that it made sense.